Good morning, everyone. Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with this week's stocks to watch, market wrap, some additional tools, all kinds of stuff going on. Today, I got a lot to go through. Um, really appreciate you taking time to watch this video, and I hope you get something out of it. All right, so real quick for the pro members, just a little housekeeping stuff. We're going to try out Discord this week. It doesn't mean I'm going to shut down Rumble Talk, which is the current chat room we're using, but I'm also going to try out Discord because it does have voice integration and it could be useful for those that want to use or talk on a mic instead of having a delay where I post some news alerts or you know stocks I'm watching into the chat room. We're gonna try out this voice stuff on Discord. So look for that in the notification from us. Hopefully today or tomorrow morning. So I'm gonna be doing both. Gonna have Discord and Rumble Talk both open. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to do. I'm just gonna do this. This. Let's take a look at what we got coming up next week for earnings. All right, we've got the big day is Thursday, right? All the financials. That could really set the tone for the markets towards the end of the week. If the earnings come in strong, good guidance, then maybe the financials get a bounce. But the financials have not been looking good for the last couple of weeks. So that's one thing we definitely want to keep an eye on for this week. And something I just wanted to share with you. I just signed up for this. This is called Whale Wisdom. And what it is basically you punch in uh, um, a stock symbol. It'll let you know how many 13Fs are being filed and what percentage of change you've got for funds that are either increasing or decreasing their positions. You can look at see what funds are actually involved. It's a pretty cool site. I really like it. I mean, it goes through and tells you all the shares, how many shares different funds own. This is a pretty cool little deal. And then they send you a quarterly 13F update. Let you know what hedge funds are adding or decreasing. I think this is a pretty cool site and one that you might want to sign up for and have their free quarterly report sent to you. Okay? All right, so there's that. Let's take a look at the economic calendar for next week and see what we've got going on. So we have 10th. Okay, let's see. We got labor market conditions. We've got the JOLTS. That's the job openings report, which is kind of interesting. We got Neil Kashkari. Oh, we got Janet Yellen speaking, huh? On Monday after the close, it looks like. That could be interesting. We've got Red Book. We've got NFIB, small business optimism, mortgage applications, Atlanta Fed business. Okay, the petroleum status report, jobless claims, PPI on Thursday, consumer sentiment, and let's see, we got CPI on Friday, along with retail sales and business inventory. So we've got some economic data out there that could impact the markets. I think more of what could impact the markets will be, developments in Syria, comments from Trump, stuff like that. So, although I think Congress is on a break now, I think they've gone for vacation or whatever. But all right, so let's take a look at the markets themselves. So, last week's watch list didn't have a lot of big runners. Had a couple, but not a lot of big runners, and had some that were pulling back. And you know, I would suggest that neither bears or bulls are in control because no one has any confidence in either direction right now. We're still kind of in a choppy market, so we're getting some choppy action. Um, And I kind of expect that to continue. Now, does that mean that we can't drift down here and maybe test this 50-day simple moving average or this area of price support in the NASDAQ? We certainly could. Um, we're having some difficulty with this 59.30, let's call it, in the NASDAQ, but certainly not breaking down with any significance, right? We're just kind of consolidating, buying time, working off overbought conditions. So uh, I would say the bulls have been doing a fairly good job of defending the markets and the indexes from a bear raid or bear attack, right? We're just kind of biding our time, and let's see what happens next week, see if that continues. All right. So NASDAQ, just healthy consolidation, really. Let's take a look at those financials real quick that I just mentioned. And this is, look, this does kind of look like a bear flag setup, right? This is not a real clean looking positive setup for the financials. This is the FAS 3-time bull ETF, and it really does not have that good looking of a technical setup. Maybe that changes after Thursday. FAZ actually kind of has a bull flag kind of setup, and testing this trend line. If the financials break down, then this FAZ could be an opportunity for a trade on a break over 20 bucks. Right? We've got some resistance there at 20. Take it out with some conviction. Maybe we go up and test this 2160 area, which is where we have the 100 EMA. So financials will be interesting, but I think they get more interesting towards the end of the week. GLD. So, been telling the members at Alpha Wolf Trading that, if we take out the 200-day moving average within gold with some real conviction, with some real volume, then maybe we get some good action at GDX, GDXJ, JNUG, Nugget. That could potentially happen if we really take out that 200-day 120 mark with some real conviction. Now we close at 1946. We did try to take out the 200-day on Friday. Didn't close above it, but a nice volume spike. We are a little overbought, but things can stay overbought, right? So if we can take out that 120.50, let's say, with some real conviction and then close above the 200-day, that could give us some action in GDX, GDXJ, JNUG, Nugget, right? All of those we could see some good action in. These did not move as well as I would have expected with the move that we had in gold, but we'll see what happens if we can take out that 200-day with some real conviction. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on that space to potentially get involved for either a day trading opportunity, or if we really get a breakdown in the markets and there's some fear out there. You see a rise in volatility, you see a weakness of the dollar, and then you see gold moving. I think these, those ETFs could be good for some trade opportunities. IBB has been in a short-term downtrend. We are below the 50-day moving average. We had a little bit of a bounce on Friday, but what we really need to see is we need to see us break through this short-term trend line, head back up towards that 300 mark. Now, we have been holding right here at about the I guess that's the 20 SMA, or is that the 100 EMA? Might be the 100 EMA actually, that we've been holding at. So 285, 286, right in this area has been acting as price support. Let's see if we continue to act as price support, or if we wind up breaking down below that 286. And if we do, I think potentially we're coming down to test this 280 area, which is where the 200-day moving average currently lies. Now, we're not overbought. We are actually a little bit oversold. Could be getting a little bit of a bounce, but let's see how we react at this trend line here. IBB, I think, is a sector that we do want to keep an eye on. IWM, let's take a look at that. Small caps. So, came up, tested this trend line, pulled back, right back down to the 100 EMA, bounced off of that as potential support below the 50 SMA, below the 50 EMA. If we break below 132 with some conviction, I think it becomes problematic for the IWM and small caps. Again, this is a little bit oversold and potentially see a bounce, but let's see what happens at this trend line at the 50-day moving average. I mean, right now, all of these indexes appear to be guilty until proven innocent. So let's just see how next week develops. IYT did manage to break over this trend line, is consolidating just below the 50 EMA, right? Actually kind of has a little bull flag setup here. Now, Delta Airlines, I believe, reports next week. I think it might be on Wednesday. That could give a little bump to the transportation sector, depending on how their earnings come in. But, still below the 50 EMA, below the 50 SMA. We'll see what it does next week. If we break below 160 and close below 160, I think that becomes problematic for the transportation space. So keep that level in mind. Let's look at LABD and LABU. So if the IBB does break down, there's going to be a trading opportunity in LABD. If we get a nice bounce in the IBB, there could be a nice little trade in LABU. So keep those on your radar. Let's see. There's a couple of Russia ETFs, RSX, which is, maybe it's RUSS. Okay, so we've got the RUSS, which is the bear ETF, and then we've got the RUSL, which is the bull ETF. We had a gap down in the bull, and we had a gap up in the bear because of what's going on in Syria. Could see some continuation, some follow through in this RUSS. Could be worth keeping an eye on for a potential trading opportunity. Now, because it is a foreign ETF, it does have these gaps, so it's a little challenging to play this one, right? But I think it's still worth keeping an eye on. Shipping. Now, it's interesting, the ETF itself is not looking all that fantastic, but going through my scans, I did see quite a few shippers, and this is very similar to what happened last week. There was a lot of good, decent-looking setups within the shipper space, and I am seeing more shippers that have decent-looking setups and had some pretty decent moves last week. So maybe that space, we could see some continuation. I think it's worth keeping an eye on the shipper space. SMH, arguably one of the strongest sectors out there for a long time. Carter Worth, who I do watch and I respect the guy's technical abilities, is kind of suggesting that the SMH is about due for a pullback, and maybe that does happen. Maybe we get some corrective action here. I don't know. Looking for it to pull. If it does break below the 50 EMA, 50 SMA at about 77.50, it's got a long ways to pull back. Just come back and test the 200-day moving average, and then also we have a trend line, a long-term trend line or longer-term trend line that it could come back and test. So, but still a very good-looking sector. It's been consolidating. If we break down, it could get ugly quick, right? I mean, that's usually the way things work. When things really start to break down, they can have some pretty swift breakdowns. But until we break through the 50 EMA, 50 SMA, and if we close below there on some significant volume, I still think the SMH looks really, really good. S&P 500, just really kind of in consolidation mode, right? I mean, did pull back, broke below the 50 EMA, SMA, managed to climb right back above it. Now we're consolidating. Could we break down again? Certainly we could. We'll wait and see what happens, but a couple of areas to keep an eye on are the 50-day moving average, and then potentially down here at the 100 EMA where we've got some price support as well, down to about 229, 230, let's call it. Um, and see if that holds the support. If we break below 230, likely going to come down and maybe test that 200 day somewhere around 220. Let's take a look at TVIX, and this actually is in the stocks to watch list this week. You know, if we get some weakness, if we break down in some sectors, you know, there's likely going to be some volatility coming into the market. And the way we can play volatility is TVIX. We can play it with TVIZ. We can play it with UVXY. Uh, you know, we have to wait and see what happens, right? We have to see if we really have a breakdown, and then volatility could come into play. But you know, don't chase volatility, right? If you see a spike, if we gap down on Monday and you see a spike in volatility, don't buy it right off the gap up on Monday. You know, let the market settle a little bit and see if that volatility continues. We've had a lot of, you know, fake outs within the volatility area, so just be very careful and play it size appropriate if you decide to get involved. UUP, which is the dollar, coming right up into this trend line, right? I mean, we are at an area of potential resistance, had a big pop, consolidation, and then a little bit of a pop on Friday, testing this trend line. We'll see if we can take this trend line out and head back up into this 2650 area. If we can't, maybe we pull back, you know, and that would be, like I said, something that would probably be good for gold, worth keeping an eye on. USO has had a heck of a run, grinding higher. Um, some speculation out there that this will not last, that this will eventually pull back as well. We'll see what happens. Coming up into a trend line of potential resistance right at the 50 SMA. We'll see what happens if oil pulls back. You're likely going to see some weakness in that space, in that sector. So keep it in mind. But if we take out that trend line with some conviction, you know, you're going to see more strength within the energy space. Aerospace defense, you know, you would think this would be doing a bit better after what's going on with Syria, but still doing okay. Just broke this short-term trend line and managed to close right on top of the 50 SMA. You know, worked off an overbought condition. I think this is a space that likely is going to do better moving forward, especially if there's more geopolitical unrest. So worth keeping an eye on XAR and aerospace defense names. Home builders been consolidating. You know, we are heading into, I think, the best time of the year for home selling. Worked off the overbought condition. We are now near oversold. I think the home builder space is probably an attractive one, probably more of a swing type trade heading into the spring selling season. All right, let's see. I'm trying to blast through this as fast as I can. Materials, just in consolidation mode. Energy, basically the same thing. Consolidation right at the 200 day and the 50 SMA, 50 EMA. A lot of just a cluster of moving averages right there to try and get through. XLF, we already talked about it. Okay, industrials consolidating, you know, right at the 50 EMA, SMA. We'll see how they do next week, but actually not looking too shabby, just consolidating. Utilities have been really kind of bouncing between these two areas of resistance and support, right? So between the 50 EMA and $52, between $50 and 52, 50-50, 50-50 and 52. So just in consolidation mode, if the markets break down, that tends to be an area that people move to for perceived safety. So something to keep in mind there. XLV Healthcare really has been kind of impressive. It's been consolidating and had a nice run. It's pulled back, and it's really been consolidating just above the 50-day moving average. And if we can take out this trend line, I think healthcare is a space that could be pretty compelling to be involved in. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on healthcare. Consumer discretionary, you know, holding up actually pretty darn good. Worked off the overbought condition. We'll see what happens next week. XME, metals and mining, flirting with the 50 EMA, consolidating just below. Oil and exploration, flirting with this trend line, flirting with the 50 EMA, SMA. And then retail, which is really one of my least favorite sectors. But could this be a double bottom potentially? Maybe it could be. Look for if retail can take out this trend line, take out the moving averages. Maybe you get a nice pop in that space. There's been already 10 retailers that have closed this year. Bankruptcy, and I sent an article out to the pro members at Alpha World Trading. One analyst calling for 50 retailers to file bankruptcy this year. I think that space is very challenged, especially the big brick and mortar locations. I think REITs that are mall based also are probably something that you want to be very cautious of. I just think that whole space is under a lot of pressure. So tough sledding in that space. All right, so let's move on now to stocks to watch. Right here on the right, I have stocks that one of the pro members sends me every week with a trade plan for each stock that he presents, and he really does a fantastic job. And this is the kind of thing that we try to focus on over at Alpha World Trading, teaching people to how to have a plan for each and every trade that they want to take. Why take a trade if you don't know what your risk reward is? Why would you do that, right? Why would you take a trade if you don't know if it's going to be a swing or a day trade? Or do you take a trade and for a day trade, and then you allow it to become a swing because maybe it went the wrong way and you're holding and hoping, right? Having a very detailed trade plan can keep you either in a stock and let the plan develop, or get you out of a stock when it goes against you, right? Because you have a clearly defined plan. So anyway, Peter sends in this list, and ironically, or not ironically, we often have some of the same stocks on our list for my stocks to watch for the following week. And we have that happen again this week. So let me go ahead and just get started with the stocks I've got on my list. And there are quite a few of them. Now, Peter gave me a shortened list this week, and one of the reason he did that, he says, look, there's just too many stocks to watch. I'm trying to reduce the amount of stocks I'm keeping an eye on so that I can focus more. And I think that's great. I am used to watching a lot of stocks, and a lot of times the stocks that I have on my list, they don't move, right? Sometimes they don't move. They're not ready yet. The setups haven't been invalidated or validated. They're just still setting up. So, narrowing down your watch list is great, but sometimes it can be very frustrating because you sit and watch these stocks, just a select few, and the whole different sector goes crazy, right? And you miss those. Like, for example, China, low float China garbage names were popping left and right on Friday. Now, those are high risk trades, but probably a sector that we may want to keep on an eye on for next week. Do I think it was a one-day event? Could have been. You don't want to go overly aggressive in any of these names. CETC is one that had a big pop and then halted and is still halted. So keep that in mind. I mean, this thing could open back up and, gap down significantly if there's bad news. So you just want to be very careful with some of these low float garbage names. All right, AKRX. This had a big pop on Friday over the 200-day moving average. Big volume, big volume. Not sure what made it pop. This could be a potential red to green play. Looking for a potential break over the $30 holla. So, where can we look at this and say, if we get a pullback to an area of support or potential support, maybe 28.60, pull back to there, 28.50, maybe $28, somewhere in this area. See if it pulls back to 28 and then you get a bounce. Now, this has already been up. This is like the third day in a row, but the volume was big. It is coming up into an area of resistance. It has broken this longer term trend line, which makes it kind of more interesting to me. Look for a pullback to $28 and then a potential bounce. Could be a day trade opportunity. 89 million shares in the float, 12.6% short interest. I think it's worth keeping an eye on. So it's got a fairly small float, decent short interest. Probably going to get some more shorts jumping in on this one. Worth having on the radar. DELT. So it's at an interesting spot. It's over all the moving averages, right? It broke above the moving averages here. It's been consolidating for a while. Got a little bit of a volume pop on Friday. Tried to take out that trend line, was unable to do so. Now, maybe we get another shot at that next week. Look for a break over $177 with some real volume. Maybe you get a 2 test and roll. It does have a tendency to be a pop and flopper, right? Look at these candles. Pop and flop, pop and flop, pop and flop. Even on Friday, pop and flop. So don't chase this one. Look for a setup. Look for some real volume. And maybe there's a scalp opportunity there. Only 3 million shares in the float on this. Traded 1.5 million shares on Friday. So half of its float was traded on Friday. If you see this thing trading 3 million shares, trading its entire, or 6 million shares, it's trading its entire float. So could be an opportunity there. Don't chase it. Play it size appropriate, right? Don't go overly aggressive in a stock like that. AKS, I believe Peter had this on his list. I also have it on my list. What's interesting about it is it's sitting right here on top of the 200-day moving average, at least from my perspective. We'll see what Peter's perspective is in a minute. Sitting on the 200-day, bounced on Friday with some volume. I think there were some rumors flying around about a potential acquisition or selling off a division or something like that with AKS. All right, entry 735 is what Peter is looking for as an entry. 735, 740 I think would be good as well. Stop 690. First target 790. Second target 835. Nice bounce off 200-day moving average and high volume, shorter term moving average curving. Stochastic curving up. I would look for a red to green stop below the 200-day. Earnings are on the 25th of April. No insider activity. There was some. See, here we go. There was some speculation last week of this company being considered for a takeover. Peter he's doing his work, man. He's doing his work. I like it. I like the whole setup. I like the plan. This is a thicker stock, 21%, 212 million shares in the float, 21% short interest. So it has had, it's probably more of a swing than it is a day trade, but it has some decent day trade pops, some good range in day trade. So worth keeping an eye on for either. Like I said, could be more of a swing though. We'll see what happens. It is below the 50-day moving average. So, but I think Peter has a really good trade plan in place for this one, and definitely worth keeping an eye on AKS. UVXY, you know, TVIX. Now, Peter brought this up and says, just something to note. I know there has been a little fear in the market. There has been little fear in the market recently. However, both UVXY and TVIX closed above their 20-day moving average on heavy volume for the first time since November. Definitely worth a watch. I completely agree with that statement. I do think that it is worth a watch. Um, we need to see some real fear come into the market. Like I said, you don't want to chase these. There have been a lot of head fakes in UVXY, TVIX. Look for an intraday setup, but worth keeping an eye on both UVXY and TVIX. Seed. So, look, low float, garbage China names were in play on Friday. This seed is interesting because it's taking out this trend line. It's above the moving averages, just closed above the 200 day. All right, with pretty good volume. This has only got 18 million shares in the float. I think ag stocks in general are kind of interesting. That space is kind of interesting. Uh, this is one to worth keeping an eye on. The fact that it took out this trend line needs to get through $2.35 with some real volume, some real conviction, and maybe you get a three test, 280 to 290 up into that area. Um, could even potentially go up and get a three test. It's worth keeping an eye on. Maybe a red to green. I don't know. Pull back to $2, 219, 215. And then take out that 200 day again with some real volume. I think it's worth keeping an eye on for a day trading opportunity. Doesn't appear as though they're making any money. Matter of fact, looks like they're losing a pretty good clip of money. But doesn't mean we can't get a nice day trade opportunity out of this. Don't chase it because it can be a pop and flopper. So keep that in mind. TVIX, we already talked about it, right? We already talked about this. Potentially something to keep an eye on if the markets pull back. All right, shipper. So here's a shipper that I came across on Friday in pre-market prep. I think this one is kind of worth keeping an eye on. 24 million shares in the float, 10% short interest. It's flirting with taking out 840, right? Now, it had a little pop. It's above all the moving averages, right? Had a little pop, got a little volume on Friday, not a ton, but potential flat top breakout here, right? Broke over this trend line. Where can this bad boy go? If it really gets some volume, I think maybe we get a 9 test. I think that's possible. Even maybe up to $10, $9.95, somewhere in this area. I'm just looking at this area of where we've had some resistance in the past and support, right? Resistance and support. So somewhere up in the nine and change range. I think it's worth keeping an eye on this one. Maybe a pullback to $8.10 could be an ideal entry. Stochastics are curling to the upside. Worth keeping an eye on, especially if the sector continues to be in play. And there were several, and I mean several, stocks in the shipping space that had a decent move on Friday. So worth having this ASC on the radar. ENDP had a little bit of a bounce on Friday. Now, it's coming up into a trend line. It's testing the 50-day moving average. Now look, last couple of times it's tested the 50-day. It has not been able to break through. Okay? Specialty generic has been a terrible sector. It's been getting, destroyed. But potentially take out this trend line, take out the $12 holla with some conviction. Maybe we get a nice little run in ENDP. And there's another one that I have in that space And which is HZMP. I'll show you that one in a second. But there were a couple of names within this sector that were getting a little bit of action, and maybe if we maybe we see a continuation of that next week. So worth keeping an eye on. A little bit thicker stock, 197 million shares, 10% short interest. All right, moving on. TPC. Very upset about this one actually because I wanted it as a swing, or actually I wanted it in my long-term hold account is where I wanted it, and I wanted it close to the 200-day moving average. That's where I wanted to get it, or 25 is what I had in my head, 25 or somewhere in that area. And look, it's come back and tested 2660 a couple of times and then bounced, and now it's testing 32.70, $33, right? If it could take out $33, I think could get a nice little pop. Let's see, acquisition looks like they did a grant. Engineering construction firm. I definitely think this is worth keeping an eye on for a break over 33. It's more of a swing to me. 38 million shares in the float, not a big float, almost 10% short interest. It's better, if the markets pull back, if they roll over, this is one I would take into consideration for a swing or a long-term hold. I really would love to get it closer to the 200-day moving average, and maybe 2650 is the spot. But if it takes out $33 with conviction, gonna have to look at this right now and see. I mean, that's a pretty big spot, right? $33 is a pretty big spot going back a few years here. So support back in 2008, resistance in 2014, resistance in 2017. I don't know, man. It's a pretty big spot to try and take out. If it pulls back to $25, I think it's worth taking a flyer in. All right, that's TPC. DRNA, 14 million shares in the float, small float. Recently had a nice pop, pulled back, got out of the upper Bollinger Bands, pulled back. $3 is seeming to act as support. Now this might need more time to flag out, right? It might need to bounce a little bit more here, but see if 3 holds support. Maybe 3 is a decent place to take it for an entry. If it breaks over the trend line with some real volume, get another volume spike, potentially, you get a pop up into the 380 area. This is probably more of a day trade type opportunity. So I've got an alert set on a break over this trend line. We'll see if it does take that out, and look for an intraday setup there. Biotech stock, thin float, worth keeping an eye on. It might need more time. It might need more time to consolidate a little bit here. V-Ray, this is upsetting to me. Another one that's upsetting. I mean, it's not upsetting. I'm not going to cry over it, but I had this. This was really on my radar back here. They had earnings, and earnings did not look good. I probably should have done a little bit better due diligence on it, but man, this thing took off like a rocket after earnings, and I thought earnings were pretty poor, but apparently I just read the headline and I didn't really dig into it. But there is a nice, it had a nice run. It's pulling back. Potentially, now Peter actually had this on his list as well. It did catch my eye. Let's see what Peter's got here for an entry. 750 for an entry. 720 stop. First target 880. Second target 10. I like the flag on this, which hopefully a red to green entry, bounce off the 20 SMA. Around 750. Stochastics curling up. The downside is that 10% owners sold about 200,000 shares between 780 and 870. That could have been nothing more than taking advantage of the price, though. Directors bought 400,000 shares in January around $3 level. Talk about insider trading. Earnings are on May 12th. So I think to me, V-Ray is much more compelling at 6 and change, right? This area that it broke out of. But, you know, if it pulls back to 750 and holds, I suppose that could be an interesting area to try and take it. 6.5 million shares in the float, 14% short interest. I am not crazy about the size of shares that insiders are selling, but you know, insiders sell for a lot of different reasons. I think that this probably continues to move its way back down towards this 50-day moving average, but I could be wrong. Takes out that trend line, could be a good intraday setup. I guess for me, I would either want to see it break over 8 and try to find an intraday setup there if it's on real good volume, or maybe see how it acts on a pullback into this 650 area. I don't know where the 50 EMA is. But, you know, 750 could be. I just have a feeling that if it hits 750, it likely is taking 750 out. I don't know. That's my feeling. We'll see. But I see what you're looking at there, Peter. It definitely has an interesting look. ACBFF. So this is a pot stock that Peter posted in the chat room on Friday after the close. Does have an interesting potential flat top breakout here. This must be. I wonder if this is a Toronto or Canadian stock. I think it is. Yeah. So you know, look, it's investor in Australian meta. Oh, this Australian. Okay. It's got an interesting setup on the daily. Now it's had a pretty nice run, but this is an interesting spot. How many shares? It doesn't tell me how many shares are in the float. I would imagine this is probably a thin floater, but a break over 215 with conviction. This one could be interesting. 783,000 shares traded hands, so there's a little bit of liquidity there too. It's not like one of these really tiny thin ones. I think it's worth paying attention to. But let me see what Peter put on his trade plan here. Entry to stop 185, first target 217, second target 295. This pot name that broke its downward trend from November. Volume is picking up again. Moving averages are turning higher. If it does break through 217 level, it has a clear sailing to $3. I agree, Peter. I agree. Now, I wouldn't say it's completely clear. I would say right here at about 250, if you've got this thing at your entry, you best be scaling some at 250, right? Scale out some at 250 and then hold some for lotto of a three tagger, and maybe not even, try to get the 3, maybe get 295, right? Scale another portion at 295 and then hold a very small lotto position to see if you get a 3 test and roll. I mean, I think that's a good strategy. All right. Good one, Peter. IMMY got a pretty hot looking setup on the daily here. Had a big spike, good volume, pulled back low volume. Right? Nice little setup here. I think this one's worth keeping an eye on for a 4 roll. Right? 11 million shares in the float. Not a big short interest. Pierced the upper Bollinger. Hold on a second. Quiet, Bubba. All right, pierced the upper Bollinger Band, pulled back on lower volume. Nice little reversal candle there on Friday. Let's see if we can take out the $4 hollow with some conviction. Worked off the overbought condition. Stochastics curling up. Let's see if we can get a break over this trend line with some volume. Could be a nice day trading opportunity there. HZNP. So this is the other specialty generic that could potentially get a bounce. I mean, it's been basing, and this is, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe I deleted my notes here. I did. I don't know why. This one had some price targets on it, and I'm not sure why my notes got wiped out, but this had some price targets. I think 18, 20 bucks. It's kind of basing here at 14.20. Takes out this trend line, or takes out 15 bucks. Gonna likely have some resistance at the moving averages. Got a lot of moving averages overhead, but could come up and test this trend line somewhere around 1650 or so. So I think, again, if the specialty generics start to move, keep an eye on HZNP and ENDP. Buen, buen. So another one that is, I have a lot of upsetting stocks in here this this week. Um, I was dead on with this one. Watching this, I mean, I was watching this one. This little candle actually made me stop watching it. It had a really nice looking setup. This candle pulled back, and I took my eye off of this, and then it just ripped. I mean, this thing went from $4 to $8. Nice double, right? And now it's flagging out a bit. I mean, it does have an interesting look. It might need more time, but it is consolidating. Does have a good look. 12 million shares in the float. Not a big short interest. It might need more time to consolidate. Maybe it becomes more compelling for an entry around 730 or 750, right? And then you put your stop just below $7. Risk 50 cents. Where do I think it can go? If we can take out, and I think we can get up to into the 950 area. I think it's worth keeping an eye on BWEN, but this might need more time to consolidate or flag out a bit. X, this is sent in by Peter. Let's see what the plan is on this one. It's a great day trading stock as it has had a lot of range. I will look for day trade opportunities, but regarding swing or longer term hold, I think 31 entry would be good level to buy. The stock has been in a range since December. Weekly stochastics are oversold. Given the geopolitical climate, steel still has a bullish trend. The 31 level has maintained support since stock has been in this trend. The level was also prior resistance. If you look at the weekly chart, it can get above 50 MA. This may make another run higher. Earnings are the 25th of April. So let's take a look at the weekly. Yeah, that's a pretty big area of support right there, right? Pretty big area of support. And then you got kind of a cup going on here, a cup with handle, maybe, huh? Yeah, this has got a good looking setup. I like it. It is a thicker stock, 173 million shares. I mean, that's not super thick, but it's thicker. 11% short interest. It does have decent range. I think this is a good setup, potentially a good trade opportunity. Good job, Peter. VIVE, proposed offering March 9th. Priced at 423. Insider buys 5.7 million shares in March at $4. Pulled back to the 200 day after a nice run. Only traded 60,000 shares on Friday. 6.6 million shares in the float, 12% short interest. I think what has caught my eye about Vive is the fact that it held at this 200 day. Potentially a trend line break with some volume. You want to see some real volume though, right? Before you try to get involved in this. Trend line break. Maybe gets a 6 test and roll. It would be an intraday setup, some kind of a day trade. I think it's worth keeping an eye on Vive. See if that 200 day continues to hold. Cool. Looks pretty cool. Actually, insiders buy 1336, 20,000 shares. So, popped, got out of the upper Bollinger Band, consolidating. It may need more time to consolidate. Maybe it becomes more interesting at 12 bucks or 12 and change, 12.50, right? See if that holds support, knowing that Insider bought 20,000 shares at 13.30. Let it work off the overbought condition. It's had a heck of a run. It's only got 4 million shares in the float, so super tiny float. Probably more just of a day trade opportunity for me, especially if it gets some real volume, right? I mean, it traded 172,000 shares on Friday. I mean, you want to see at least 400,000 shares trading hands. But I think this is worth keeping an eye on for a potential flag break and break over the $15 holla with conviction. I got another engineering construction name. This is at an interesting spot. It's right here on this trend line. Had a big pop, pulled all the way back, and now we're sitting just above 850, right? And maybe 860. If it pulls back to 860, you take it there. Maybe you put your stop just below, I don't know, 820 or so. 23 million shares in the float. I don't know what's going on here with this. Oh, you know what? They just bought a cement company in hold on a second. Professional service. No. Sterling Construction. Oh yeah, they just did an acquisition of a Texas concrete construction firm. I thought that was kind of interesting, right? Since there's going to be maybe potentially a big wall built down there, I don't know. Kind of could be turn out to be a pretty smart move, but STRL I think is worth keeping an eye on. It's in an interesting spot for a potential bounce. Takes out the trend line. Look for a potential day trading opportunity. Could be a swing. Probably need to do a little more due diligence in that one. SYNL, it's another steel name. 10% owner bought 49,000 shares at 12.40, 56,000 shares at 12.30. It's flirting with a $13 roll. It's above all the moving averages. I kind of like the setup on this one, especially if steel names start to get some action. Likely going to have. I think it can go up and get a 15 test is what I'm looking at. Potential 15 test on SYNL. 8.2 million shares in the float. So small float. It only traded 14,000 shares on Friday. So got to be super careful here. But if this thing gets some real volume, like 100,000, 200,000 shares, 300,000 shares, could get a nice run. So it's worth keeping an eye on, but recognize that it is a very thin stock. INVE, flirting with this trend line, came down, basically kissed the 50 EMA, test this area of price support, bounced. Now it's testing this trend line, see if it can take that trend line out and get some follow through. Think you get an 8 test and maybe take out the $8 holla. 9.4 million shares in the float, traded 129,000 shares on Friday. Stochastics curling up. It's got an interesting setup, worth keeping an eye on. EXAS flirting with the $23 holla, pulling back to an area of potential support after piercing the upper Bollinger Band. Stochastics look to be curling up. 95 million shares in the float. Big short interest, 34% short interest. I think, Cowan just put a $30 price target on this one. It's got a pretty decent look on it. Let's see if it gets any follow through. Takes out 23 bucks on next week. Gurn. So Gurn, I'm not super crazy about this technical setup at all, but they have a conference call scheduled for April 10th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. So, not sure what the conference call is about. Could be good, could be bad. I don't know. But Gurn has been a runner in the past, right? It's had some big runs. It can be a pop and flopper. 134 million shares in the float, 24% short interest. So there is a decent short interest there. If they have any kind of real good, compelling news, this thing could pop, right? It takes out 244. It's got a big gap to fill up to about 280 or so. It's worth keeping an eye on. Let's see what the news is on Monday. I'm just putting it on your radar. But technically, the setup doesn't look all that great. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what the news is. BZH, this is more of a long-term hold. I've been, I actually at one time I had this for a swing and then I got rid of it. And I've been looking to try and get back in it. And it's, sitting right on the 200-day moving average. Got a nice tight coiled up pattern here. Looking for a 12 roll. It worked off an overbought condition. It looks a little oversold coming up into the spring season. This is more of a long-term hold or a swing trade. And if it takes out this trend line, takes out 12 bucks with conviction, maybe that's the ideal entry on it. But worth keeping an eye on. It does have a decent look. And there has been insider buying in this range. So that's another thing I kind of like about BZH. AGN, this was sent in by Peter. Entry 346.60, stop 3, or what? No. Okay, that's a typo. Enter 246.60. Stop 232.50. First target 242.50. Second target, maybe swing or longer term hold. Crossed above the 200-day moving average early March. Golden cross. Stochastics are oversold, curving up. Earnings are May 9th. No recent insider activity. So I'm thinking 236.60 is the entry. Or maybe it's 226.60. Hold on. Let's try and figure this out. All right, I'm thinking that 233.50. That's probably what we're looking at here. Is 233.50 or 234. Could be a good entry on this. You got the 50 EMA there. You got potential price support in that area. It's definitely been consolidating for a while. Got a good look to it. 242.50. Yeah, I would say, maybe your first target scale is 241.80 or somewhere in that area. 241.80, scale out some, and then hold it for that potential 247. Hold some shares, but nice. It is a nice looking setup on the daily time frame. Momo, this does this every time to me. Momo, great looking setup, great earnings, gapped up, hasn't pulled back to close that gap, worked off the overbought condition, flirting with $36 holla. Definitely got a good looking setup. Small, I think this has got a small float. Definitely worth keeping an eye on Momo. It's got a really good looking setup. 3370 is Peter's ideal entry. Stop 3270. First target 35, second target 36.20. You know, the thing is, Peter, if this thing takes out 36 bucks, 36.50, 36.20 with conviction, probably going to get a nice pop on this to about 40 bucks. So I would take that second target at 36, but I would also hold maybe some lottos to see if you get a continuation of the run up to about 40 bucks. Overbought stochastics worked off. They're curling back up, looking for an entry close to 20 MA. If it breaks above 36.20, then it's in blue sky territory. Earnings are May 16th. Yeah, it's a great looking setup and definitely worth keeping an eye on for a day trade, maybe even for a swing. You know, if you get it at 32.50 or so, um, you know, if it were to pull back to 32.50 and hold, that would be an interesting spot potentially for me. Um, but I could see 32.70 as well. Or 33.70. Hold on a second. Let me see where 33.70 puts us. Okay, I see yeah. I So, you know, look, I don't know. I just think maybe you want to give yourself a little bit of room on this one. You know, personally, I would like to get it on a pullback to about 32.50, right? Put the stop down below 32. And then if it takes this 36 bucks out with conviction, I think, you know, there's a potential intraday setup there for a day trade. But love the whole setup on Momo. IDRA had this one on the watch list last week, and um, you know, it broke down. It broke down. This Baker Brothers are involved in this one, so Baker Brothers purchased some shares April 6th at $2.43. And there was other insider buying at $1.44, $2, I think. Baker Brothers bought at 2 in October. So, you know, it had some data last week, and apparently they didn't like what they saw, but the Baker Brothers bought it after that data came out, I believe. They bought it the 6th. So now it's at an interesting spot of where they also bought it before, which was $2, and you got the 50 EMA there. So potential bounce play opportunity off the 50-day moving average. I don't know. You know, off of potential price support at about $1.95. You know, if it continues to pull back there, look for it to hold the support. Maybe get a bounce trade there. You know, I'm just looking at it as a potential intraday bounce play. I think it's worth keeping an eye on. ST, been watching this one for a while. This is Sensor Technology. And actually what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for it to break below this $40.39 and come down and test this 200-day, test this trend line. I think this becomes more of an interesting type, swing type play at or near the 200-day or $39 as potential support. It had a nice run. It pierced the upper Bollinger Band, bounced up, came and tested that trend line, pulled back. Now it's kind of bear flagging. You know, if it breaks down to this $39 area, I think it might be worth a swing entry. So I'm keeping an eye on ST. We'll see what happens over the next couple of days or so. See if it breaks below $40. Right now, it seems like 40 is trying to hold the support. IPI, we talked about this one in depth a couple of weeks ago. A tremendous amount of insider buying. They just did an offering, right? All kinds of notes here. Did an offering. Uh, insiders participated at a $1.20. It becomes, I think if it were to pull back to a $1.25 or a $1.26, I think it really becomes interesting there, but may not get that opportunity. It held up fairly well yet last week. It's consolidating right here at the 50 EMA. Takes out a $1.80 with some real volume. Maybe we get it. Maybe it's a day trading opportunity. Right now, what I'm kind of looking for is a pullback. Keep pulling back, consolidating to this 200 days, somewhere around a $1.60, and then maybe that becomes an area of potential entry. I don't know, for a swing. 55 million shares in the float, 9% short interest. They did submit plans for a potential reverse split. I think that is out there, so you have to keep that in mind on IPI as well. But worth keeping an eye on it. BCLI pulling back to an area of potential support. There's another one that Baker Brothers are involved with, I believe. Hold on. Well, maybe not. This had a nice pop, pulled back, testing support, trying to hold onto the 50-day moving average. Maybe 380. Look for it to bounce there. 16.2 million shares in the float. 5% short interest. Had a big pop, pulled back. 380 could be an area of support. Good place for it to bounce. Day trade probably. Looking on that one. VSR had a big pop. They're in the midst of trying to restructure debt. They have all kinds of stuff going on. But this is kind of interesting. It broke over this trend line. It's over the 200-day moving average. It's over the shorter-term moving averages. Had a big pop, big volume, pulled back, light volume to an area of potential support at the 200-day moving average. So, looking for an entry maybe on this at around, it only traded 37,000 shares. Keep that in mind. 6.6 million shares in the float. So very tiny float. But I don't know. Pull back to this 50-day EMA and that trend line around 138, 139. Put the stop down at, I don't know, 114, right? 110. And then look for it to take out that trend line. Maybe go back up and get a 2 test. Pretty good risk reward on this one. Worth having on the radar. I've got 2 more and then I'm done. TXMD, which, full disclosure, I took a position in last week. I think it was about $7.84 in somewhere in that area. It was up and now it's down. Priced and offering at $8.25 a while back. Cantor Fitzgerald came out on April 4th, gave this a $34 price target. They have a PUFTA date or PDUFA date on May 7th, which is coming up. This could move into it. I actually did a ton of homework on this stock over the weekend. Listened to some investor presentations, Investor Day. They've got some interesting products out there. They've got approved prenatal vitamins for pregnant women, and they've got two drugs that are in phase 3 right now. Just got positive data on one of those phase 3 drugs recently. I think, there's the average price target. Cantor is the highest, but there's others out there that have a $12 price target. There's another one that's got, I think, an $18 price target. It had a little pop. It's pulling back. I don't recommend holding something like this into a binary event, but this one is definitely worth keeping an eye on. I think maybe a better entry on it could be somewhere in the 7 and change range, 720. It's just now getting ready to cross the 50 EMA. It's getting ready to cross the 200 day golden cross. This could run into this event that they have on May 7th. We'll see. But I really kind of like this setup on this stock, and I guess maybe at 740. See if it pulls back to 740. How it acts here. Was resistance. See if it acts as support. Could be a decent entry. It is overbought, but we'll see. I like TXMD. 2.8 million shares traded here hands on Friday, and then if you look at I think hedge funds have been increasing their position TXMD too. Speaking of that, SGYP, we're going to talk about that. I didn't have it on my list, but I'm going to add it right now. NYMX had a little pop, decent volume, 28 million shares in the float. It might need more time to pull back or consolidate, just over $4, 380. Could be an area of potential support in this area, right? Maybe it needs a little bit more time to consolidate, but this one could be a day trading opportunity as well. And then let me add SGYP real quick. So SGYP, I own this. I'm underwater in it. And I bought it around 5, looking for this 200-day to hold the support. It failed miserably. And then Citibank came out and downgraded this stock last week, and I almost was going to sell it, just take the loss. But then they came out with this promotional deal that was pretty controversial and actually could go viral. And there's a Seeking Alpha article out this weekend that actually this individual kind of is thinking the same way I am, is that their strategy or marketing on this is pretty brilliant, I think. And it's in an area of potential double bottom bounce. Now it is below the 200-day moving average. You have the 50 days sloping down, not looking real encouraging right now. It'll be interesting to see. It is oversold. The downside target from the guy from Citibank was $3.70, right? And he did actually have if the rollout of their drugs does go well, suggesting that it could go to $7. So he downgraded it with a downside price target of 370, and then the upside is $7. I kind of like my risk reward on this. I stayed in it. I didn't add to the trade. I'm looking to see. I mean, it breaks down below $4 and gets down to $3.30, where there's some potential support. I'm doubling up or tripling up my position. I think that the marketing campaign that they did was absolutely the poop troop, is what they came out with, and it really could go viral. And I think they're getting some free marketing off of that. I think it was pretty good. So I'm interested in seeing what happens with SGYP next week. And if it breaks over this trend line with any kind of conviction, I may look to add to my position. Now it's going to have some resistance here at 5 and change, but at the 200-day. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with SGYP. I like it. All right. So look, I know this is a long video, and I hope you found it worth your time. I hope you found some good ideas in there. Listen, we do this every single day, Monday through Friday, for the pro members over at Alpha Wolf Trading. I do a pre-market prep video every single morning. I do a market wrap every single day. And, constantly looking for tools to provide traders to help them become better traders. So if you like what I do here, come check us out over at Alpha Wolf Trading. We have a really good group of people there, and I'm always looking to add more good people. So if you have any questions about the service, email me at tim@alphawolftrading.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. All right, have a wonderful weekend, the rest of it, and good luck trading next week. Don't chase, have a plan, know your risk reward, and I will see you all next week.